Hello guy, are you looking for new free games for your high-end PC? In this video I'm going to show you about top 25 free high-end PC games. All the games require a high-end PC. You will be satisfied with the perfect graphics. These game lists will show you in alphabetical order by game's name. Now let's get started off. Number 1. Apex Legends. Release on February 2019, Apex Legends is a free-to-play battle royale hero shooter game, developed by Respawn Entertainment and published by Electronic Arts. This game requires the highest system requirements. CPU Intel i5, 3570K or Ryzen 5. RAM 8GB. Video card 8GB, NVIDIA GeForce GTX 970 or AMD Radeon R9, 290 or higher. Free disk space? 56GB. Next over at number 2. Call of Duty. Warzon 2.0. Released on November 16, 2022, Call of Duty. Warzon 2.0 is a free-to-play battle royale video game. This game requires the highest system requirements. Core i7, 4770 or AMD Ryzen 5, 1400. RAM, 12GB. Video card, NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 or AMD Radeon RX 580 or better, and read disk space? 125GB. Next over at number 3. Century. Age of Ashes. Century. Age of Ashes is a free multiplayer dragon fighting game. This game is really attractive. Century. Age of Ashes requires the highest system requirements. CPU. Intel Core i7, 2.8 GHz or AMD Ryzen 5, 3.2 GHz. RAM, 8GB. Video card, NVIDIA GTX 970 or AMD RX 580. Free disk space? 10GB. Next over at number 4. Conqueror's Blade. Conqueror's Blade is a free-to-play, massively multiplayer online real-time tactics game. Release on May 30, 2019. Conqueror's Blade requires the highest system requirements. CPU. Intel Core i7, 7820HK or AMD Ryzen 5. RAM. 16GB. Video card, NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 or AMD Radeon R9, 390. Free disk space? 30GB. Next over at number 5. Cuisine Royale. Cuisine Royale 2nd Edition. Fulfillment of All Desires is a battle royale multiplayer online shooter video game developed by Latvian studio Darkflow Studio and published by Genshin Entertainment. This game requires the highest system requirements. CPU. Intel Core i7. RAM. 8GB. Video card, NVIDIA GeForce 1060 or better, AMD Radeon RX 480 or better. Storage. 12GB available space. Next over at number 6. Destiny 2. Release on August 28, 2017. Destiny 2 is a free-to-play online-only multiplayer first-person shooter video game developed by Bungie. This game requires the highest system requirements. CPU. Intel Core i5, 2400 or AMD Ryzen R5, 1600X RAM. 8GB. Video card, GTX 1060, 6GB or AMD Radeon R9 390, 8GB. Free disk space? 68GB. Next over at number 7. Digital Combat Simulator World or DCS World Steam Edition. Digital Combat Simulator World is a free-to-play digital battlefield game and simulation environment. DCS requires the highest system requirements. CPU: Core i5 at 3 GHz or AMD FX Ryzen. RAM: 16GB, 32GB for heavy missions. Free hard disk space: 120GB on SSD. Discrete video card: NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070 or AMD Radeon RX Vega 56 with 8GB VRAM or better. Next, over at number 8. Enlisted. Enlisted is a free squad-based multiplayer tactical first-person shooter developed by Darkflow Software and published by Gaijin Entertainment. Enlisted requires the highest system requirements. CPU: Intel Core i5 or better. RAM: 8GB. Video card: NVIDIA GeForce 1060 or better. Free disk space: 32GB. Next, over at number 9. Genshin Impact. Genshin Impact is an open-world action RPG. Genshin Impact requires the highest system requirements. CPU: Intel Core i7 equivalent or higher. RAM: 16GB. Video card: NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060, 6GB and higher. Storage space: 40GB of reserved space. Next, over at number 10. Halo Infinite. Halo Infinite is a free-to-play 2021 first-person shooter game developed by 343 Industries and published by Xbox Game Studios. This game requires the highest system requirements. CPU: AMD Ryzen 7 3700X or Intel i7 9700K RAM. 16MB. Video card: Radeon RX 5700 XT or NVIDIA RTX 2070. Free disk space: 50GB. Next, over at number 11. Overwatch 2. Release on 2022, Overwatch 2 is a free-to-play first-person shooter by Blizzard Entertainment. Overwatch 2 has improved over the older generation in terms of graphics, modes and more. This game requires the highest system requirements. CPU: Intel Core i7 or AMD Ryzen 5. RAM: 8GB RAM. Storage: 50GB of free space available. Video card: NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 or AMD R9 380. Next, over at number 12. Paragon. The Overprime. Released on December 5, 2022. Paragon. The Overprime is an action TPS MOBA that anyone can play for free. This game requires the highest system requirements. CPU: Intel Core i5 6600 or AMD Ryzen 5 2500U RAM. 8GB. Video card: NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060 or AMD Radeon RX 560. File size: 15GB. Next, over at number 13. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis is a free-to-play online action role-playing game in the Phantasy Star series, developed and published by Sega. This game requires the highest system requirements. Processor: Intel Core i9 10900. Memory: 16GB RAM. Graphics: NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2070 Super and storage: 103GB available space. Next, over at number 14. PUBG. PUBG is a free-to-play battle royale game developed and published by PUBG Studios, a subsidiary of Krafton. This game requires the highest system requirements. Processor: Intel Core i5, 6600K or AMD Ryzen 5, 1600. Memory: 16GB RAM. Graphics: NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1063GB or AMD Radeon RX 580, 4GB and storage. 50GB available space. Next over at number 15. Quake Champions. Release on August 22, 2017. Quake Champions is a first-person arena shooter developed by id Software and published by Bethesda Softworks. Quake Champions requires the highest system requirements. Processor: Intel Core i7, 7700K or AMD Ryzen 5 Pro 3350G. Memory: 16GB RAM. Graphics: NVIDIA GTX 1088GB or AMD Radeon RX 5700, 8GB. Storage: 32GB available space. Next over at number 16. Rogue Company. Rogue Company is a free-to-play multiplayer tactical third-person hero shooter video game developed by First Watch Games and published by Hi-Rez Studios. Rogue Company requires the highest system requirements. CPU: Intel Core i7, 3.20 GHz. RAM: 16GB. Video card: NVIDIA GeForce GTX 960 and free disk space: 20GB. Next over at number 17. Shatterline. Shatterline is a free-to-play FPS with a roguelike company op mode, as well as several classic versus modes, TDM, Conquest, Demolition, and Escort. Shatterline requires the highest system requirements. Processor: Intel Core i7, 7700. Memory: 12GB RAM. Graphics: NVIDIA GeForce 1070. Storage: 20GB available space. Next over at number 18. Spellbreak. Spellbreak is a free-to-play, class-based third-person shooter video game developed by Proletariat for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 4, Xbox One and Nintendo Switch, released on September 3, 2020. This game requires the highest system requirements. Processor: Intel Core i5, 6400 CPU, 2.70 GHz. Memory: 8GB RAM. Graphics: NVIDIA GeForce GT 640 or Radeon R7 GPU. Storage: 18GB available space. Next over at number 19. Splitgate. Splitgate is a free-to-play multiplayer first-person shooter video game developed and published by 1047 Games. This game requires the highest system requirements. Processor: Intel Core i5, 4670K, 3.4 GHz or AMD FX 8370. Graphics: AMD Radeon RX 580, 8GB or NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1060. RAM: 12GB. Storage: 15GB available space. Next over at number 20. Swords of Legends Online. Swords of Legends Online is an action MMORPG set in a breathtaking fantasy world with sophisticated combat mechanics and a unique storyline based on Chinese mythology. This game requires the highest system requirements. Processor: AMD Ryzen 5, 1600 or Intel Core i5, 6600K. Memory: 16GB RAM. Graphics: Radeon RX 580 or NVIDIA GTX 980T. Storage: 106GB available space. Next over at number 21. The Cycle. Frontier. The Cycle. Frontier is a 2022 first-person shooter video game developed and published by Yager Development. The cycle. Frontier requires the highest system requirements. Processor. Intel i5, 6600 or AMD Ryzen 5, 1400. Memory. 8GB RAM. Graphics. NVIDIA GeForce GTX 970 or AMD Radeon RX 570. Storage. 37GB available space. Next over at number 22. Tower of Phantasy. Tower of Phantasy is a free-to-play open-world action RPG developed by Hada Studio, a subsidiary of Perfect World. Tower of Phantasy requires the highest system requirements. Processor. Intel Core i7. Memory. 16GB RAM. Graphics. NVIDIA GeForce GT 1066GB. Storage. 30GB available space. Next over at number 23. Vampire. The Masquerade Bloodhunt. Vampire? The Masquerade Bloodhunt is a free-to-play battle royale game developed and published by Swedish developer Sharkmob. This game is very attractive. Vampire. The Masquerade Bloodhunt requires the highest system requirements. Processor. Intel i7, 8700K or AMD Ryzen 5, 3600X or better. Memory. 16GB RAM. Graphics. NVIDIA GTX 1080 or better. Storage. 20GB available space, but SSD strongly recommended. Next over at number 24. War Thunder. War Thunder is a free-to-play vehicular combat multiplayer video game developed and published by Gaijin Entertainment. War Thunder recommended requirements. CPU. Intel Core i5 or Ryzen 5, 3600 or better. RAM. 16GB. Video card. NVIDIA GeForce 1060 and higher, Radeon RX 570 and higher. Free disk space. 95GB. The end of the list is number 25. World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play naval warfare-themed multiplayer online game developed, produced and published by Wargaming. World of Warships requires the highest system requirements. Processor. Intel Core i5, 4463.2 GHz or AMD FX 8320, 3.5 GHz. Memory. 6GB RAM. Video card. GeForce GTX 660, AMD Radeon R9 270X storage. 63GB available space. Thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe. Goodbye.